This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, I am really looking forward to this interview today and have been here. This guy, just a regular guy like many of us here, many that listen to this, and I kind of throw myself into that pool also too, because he's an old dog. He started actually at 56. And the way I heard about him is he wrote a little email to me, and I do encourage folks to do that, just to say hi, ask questions, or share what you're doing. In his email, he shared some of the things that he has done since he decided to go into real estate investing, and I thought, man, this is really great. I got a hold of him. I said, would you like to be on the show? And, he was a little reluctant because he hadn't done anything like this, but he agreed after I twisted his arm a bit. I'm looking forward to this show, and I'm looking forward to hearing his approach to real estate investing. As we know, there are many different approaches. Find out how he got involved. But first, let me tell you a little bit about him. His name is Jack Poole, and he has spent 33 years in the telecommunications industry and is currently a director of technology for a Fortune 20 company responsible for driving out solutions architecture for large-scale big data predictive analytics and automation projects. All of you that understood what I just said, raise your hand right now, okay? So I'm not raising mine, okay? But maybe he'll clarify. We'll see. Anyways, Jack got his start in the IT industry by programming the automation of new Connect phone orders in a college campus environment, which later led to his design work of computer technology integration with call centers, interactive voice response units, and customer support personnel. Later, Jack went to a startup during the .com era as a VP of research and design for a wireless startup. The wireless experience then led to a position at a large wireless carrier, where he started the new identity management specialized data store responsible for supporting over $1 billion in revenue per month. Wow. During this time, Jack designed and holds a patent entitled LDAP. I guess that stands for something like replication priority, queuing system, and which allows the ordering of the most important events to be replicated to distributed databases. Another thing I don't understand, but that's okay. Anyway, he's an undergraduate of Auburn University in computer science. He's an MBA from Kennesaw State University. In his free time, Jack and his wife, Judi, like to travel with their 2 grown kids when possible and love to ski when they get the opportunity. They reside in Alpharetta, Georgia, where they are Care Network volunteers for North Point Community Church. That is a big church. But wow, I am so impressed. Jack, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you on. Given the background there, I know I went into a lot of detail, but I think that's important to know. One of the things that always amazes me is that some of the most successful real estate investors seem to have tech backgrounds. Either they're engineers or they're from that side of things. I think that there's a real advantage in especially understanding the analytical side and being able to analyze data and be able to crunch it and so forth to find those good deals. I'm really, really interested to hear your story. Why don't you just give us a little bit about your background?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So Judi and my wife and I have been here in Atlanta area for approximately 20 years, and we're proceeding, with our careers, and we both work for the same company. And we probably about 10 years ago bought a lake house, and we were really going to target that for our retirement and moved there, after we retired and so forth. And it's approximately about an hour and a half away from us. So that's what we were going to do. But then about 3 years ago, we had an idea, and we kind of ran it by each other. Because when we go on trips, and we love to travel, is that typically we'll stay in another property that we typically will find on something like VRBO or Airbnb. And so we just kind of out of the whim just asked ourselves, what if we did that with our lake house? Because we can't be there every week. And we're just wondering what would it be like to be host for other people when they were doing their travels. And so we decided to give that a try about 3.5 years ago, and it turned out much better than we would have ever imagined. And so kind of really as we talk about getting into our real estate world, if you will, I guess we really came at it from a different angle. We weren't really looking to invest in real estate, per se, or on an individual property basis, because we were really targeting this home to be our retirement location. So we proceeded forward, and really, again, the reception, I guess the response was much higher than we really thought. And so, that kind of allowed us to actually bump up some rents as we were going along. And before we really knew it, we had the whole summer of this lake house completely filled. And so what that really did was say, there's really something here. Let me find out more about it. And so then it kind of went on a 6 to 9 month education course, if you will, really for us to figure out, what does this mean in terms of what should we be doing? What are the right things to do as it relates to real estate? What are the other opportunities that are in real estate? And it just kind of initiated a big spark for us to find out what is this whole world of real estate investing, and is there really something in there for us?
So you kind of came into this which is interesting from a vacation rental standpoint, which is very interesting. And you probably could have just stayed in that space like a lot of people do. Some people maybe reach out and get some other Airbnbs or they may do things along those lines. But you wanted to look at it in full scope. Can you kind of explain that process where you decided, well, let's look at real estate in general? How did that thought process come about?
Yeah, and as you know, right, in real estate investing, there's just a ton of opportunities in a lot of different categories. And so we kind of went into it knowing that, we don't know much about any of those environments. So it really was more about, okay, we need to educate ourselves. What are the podcasts that exist that we can listen to learn more about what's going on? What are the books we should be paying attention to, and so forth? And so ultimately, especially getting into some of the Kiyosaki books, long-term rental real estate was really kind of a place we decided that we wanted to participate. And at the time, several of the podcasts and books we were listening to, or reading and listening to were really focusing on the long-term rental space, and specifically in the single-family housing area. So that's really where we decided to target. But as you know, there's always so many kind of questions that come up when you start to look at any one niche of the particular market that you really need to go through and decide on before you actually make some progress in that particular area. So that was some of our challenges, I think, is to really ask ourselves a lot of those questions and find out, exactly what did we want to target and move towards.
Right. So were you and Judi looking at supplement our retirement, or are we just looking at just some good investments that, that over time, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people invest, especially later in life. Sometimes it's, well, let's supplement. We kind of know what our pensions or our retirement fund's going to be like. Maybe we want to pad that, or maybe we want to, just have a good place to put our money so that, for the long run, it'll be in a safe place that we know we can always tap into if we need to. Or sometimes people look at, leaving a legacy to their kids. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So what was part of that thought process? Because, you obviously both have very good jobs, and I'm sure you're building up, a retirement fund or what have you. So what was sort of the thought process there?
Yeah, you actually hit on two of those that we were thinking about. One is that, yes, while we're building up a 401k and marching towards retirement, a lot of that is sort of market based and really outside of our control. And really, the idea that, we, from our lifetime, we're putting money into an account that we're then going to spend down when we're in retirement didn't really seem very pleasing to me, because really where I wanted to be was to be able to have some kind of retirement account, but not spend down essentially the principal of what's stored there, right? And so then there's some question about, well, where does that kind of opportunity exist? And so, getting into real estate is one of those that enables you to, really invest in that particular environment. But as we know, with this kind of investment, typically the prices do go up. So it really kind of keeps your base investment, and then you're able to get the cash flow on top of that. So it didn't feel like by investing in this particular area, we were spending down, if you will, our overall investment strategy. So that was kind of one area. And the other one is the legacy, because again, kind of when we get through the retirement and everything, we really wanted to have something as a legacy for the kids. And again, by having some of these investments within real estate, I think that kind of gives us that opportunity as well.
Well, those are two really great points there. One of the things I think that in many people's retirement planning efforts is that whole spend down thing. Okay, so you have to look at, okay, what you've acquired, and you've got to look at, okay, what is this going to be earning per year? Then you have to factor in, okay, what are going to be my expenses in my retirement. And, after you start calculating all that, you look at it and you go, well, I hope that this is going to last the duration, exactly. Right? And we don't know how long. I mean, people are living longer. There's a lot of other factors there. But the idea of having this, some people refer to it as like a cash cow or an ATM machine that just constantly pumps out on a regular basis in the form of cash flow. I mean, you're not drawing down on anything. If anything, you're like you said, you're actually increasing your money because you're building up equity over a period of time in those properties, and you've got this steady flow of cash that, in itself, if you do it right, it will support you completely in your retirement. If you have that need to take out a large sum here or there, or it's also there for that purpose too. You can sell a property, or you can do equity, like a cash out refi or something of that nature. But that's very smart. That is a real key point, and I think a lot of the folks listening are weighing those factors right now, especially about sort of what's going to be my drawdown, and how much am I going to draw down? Do I have to cut back on my lifestyle and the things that we want to do in our retirement, just so we can extend that period of time. But good, right. Really, really good point there. Okay, you talked about the lake home. Now, do you mind me asking what lake you guys are on?
Yeah, that's Lake Hartwell, which is right on the South Carolina and Georgia border. Ooh, so if you're in Georgia heading to South Carolina, you'll cross over a bridge that's about a couple miles from our house.
God, that's got to be a beautiful area. Oh, man, that sounds really nice. But then, after you got that, you proceeded to build up to an additional six additional long-term rentals. Now, that's pretty amazing, and you did all this within a very short period of time. Can you kind of maybe elaborate a little bit? And I want to see also if there was a goal in mind as you're doing this, like you're building up to X number of properties generating X amount of cash or what have you.
Yeah, and so the goal is really not so much the number of doors, but really, we like the metric of cash flow. So what we're targeting is kind of our initial goal is to reach the 10K per month on net cash flow. And then, of course, our follow-up goal, as kind of once we get that, would be a 20K per month cash flow. So the way it worked is that as we were fortunately getting some of the money from the rentals of the lake house, it was giving us a cushion, and we really wanted to treat that as an asset for purchasing additional properties, right? So we never wanted to get into a position of kind of quote unquote spending what we were considering was our asset, or at least money for the assets. And so we continued to pile it up along with some other cash from our income jobs, and then started looking for those long-term rental opportunities. And it took us a while. It took us about 6 months of searching. And generally, the area that we're searching is north of Atlanta. And one of our criteria is that we really wanted to be in the path of progress, right? So Atlanta, in a general sense, is growing in all directions, but the northern part is growing, I would say, much faster than the other areas, right? And so we targeted that area, and lo and behold, it happened to be on Zillow. So that's one of the things is that as I'm talking to other people that are in the same position, because we have full-time jobs, we really don't have the opportunity to find those quote unquote great deals. The deals that we've bought really have been all retail. So we found a place, I thought the numbers would work, and I called the agent. And turns out the agent who has really become my mentor is Greg Willis, who's a KW agent here in town. It was his house that he owned as a rental, and he was looking to sell it. So we ended up buying it, and as we were looking for other homes, he showed us another one, and we turned out and closed on both those homes on the same day. And as it turns out, because there was a 45-day window before we actually closed on the home, we actually were able to find renters for those two homes. And so we closed in the morning on both properties and then signed leases that afternoon on both those properties.
So that was a little more aggressive than you initially had in mind, huh? I mean, you weren't looking to buy two homes, right?
No, we would just really put our toe in the water more than anything else. And it's just that the opportunity presented itself. There was a second home. Again, same thing. An investor was selling it. It was, again, retail, although the estimate was well above what we ended up paying for it. So I thought we were kind of going into that deal with some equity on the paper. And that's turned out to be, correct so far. So again, we didn't really plan to do it that way, but the opportunity presented itself. And so we kind of thought, well, if we're going to kind of get into it, let's kind of jump in and see how this works.
Just to clarify, you mentioned that, okay, so the income that you're getting from the lake rental, right? You were just tucking that away, right? And that was building up, and you were using that to purchase properties. Is that correct? Right.
And these first two properties, we did get loans on through our credit union, and so we were just needing the closing cost and the amount for the down payment, if you will.
Okay, great. Well, that's a really smart strategy, actually, especially in this vacation rental Airbnb space where you can generate $1,000 a month or more. I mean, pretty easily in that space, depending on what your occupancy is and so forth. But and that could build up to those down payments pretty quickly, which looks like it has been the case here because you're 2.5 years. You're up to 6, so that's 6 in addition to the actual lake, your vacation property, right?
That's right. We have 7 total.
That is awesome. That is really great. Now you found this agent. Now that agent has that person helped you find all the properties since that first purchase, additional purchase?
Not all of them. Actually, some of them I have found just by kind of going out and looking. Principally on Zillow in the mornings, before I go to work, just to kind of see what's out there, what's changing, what are the costs, and so forth, and then kind of running numbers. Like a lot of other folks, I kind of have a spreadsheet in terms of potential costs for a property, and kind of look to see what the comparables are going in that particular area. And so, more often than not, some things don't work, but occasionally something will pop up. And then when I saw it, I would reach out to Greg, and then we would go out and look at the property and have some good conversations back and forth to see if this made sense or not.
And you touched on some of the elements of your criteria, in that you want it to be in the Atlanta area in a path of progress. What are some of the other criteria in terms of the types of properties that you're buying? Are they C, B? Are they all 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or are they smaller or larger? How are you sort of focusing your hunt for those good properties?
Yeah, and that's probably something that's changed a little bit as we've gone through it. So that was a critical question for us to really try to figure out before we got started, and that was, are we looking to do something that was heavier on the cash flow side, or were we really looking at some level of appreciation? Right? We've always thought that appreciation was the icing on the cake and not to depend on it. But it still, required you to kind of look at the type of properties that might be an opportunity. And so I don't know that we really had a good answer going into it. However, the neighborhoods just north of Atlanta, and specifically where we were targeting, typically were those that were about 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath. And so the first 2 homes were about that size. And I would look to say that those that we have a mortgage on probably would rate as a B or a B plus neighborhood. But as we've gotten more into it and ramped up toward the number 6 long-term rentals, a couple of the ones that we've purchased most recently are smaller in size. They're more like 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. However, they're closer to the city and closer to other neighborhoods. And so there's a higher demand for the rentals in that particular area. So they command pretty good rents as well. So the criteria as far as the size of the house has changed a little bit as we look to see where they're located. But all in all, I still try to look at what's the opportunity presenting in terms of the cost of the home, and what are the rents going to get you in that particular area.
Are you looking for a certain sort of cash flow per door on these properties?
So typically I'm looking for at least $300 a month if I have a mortgage on the property. If I don't have a mortgage, and that's been the case for the last 3 that we purchased, then I'm looking to get close to $850 cash flow in those homes.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And the ones in close to the city, and I know a lot. There's so much development, especially for the millennial audience. Being close to the city, where you might even need to drive. You could walk to work, or there's just a strong attraction. Cities are being built up with the idea of being a draw for this audience. Is that who you're primarily sort of targeting at? Sort of the young professionals or people that are working in the city that want to be close by?
So the location is very important. Although for our particular properties, I would say the typical family is very young. They're just starting out. They may or may not have a child, but if they do, it's probably less than 5 years old, and so closeness, if you will, to their job is most important. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned, I'm just taking a little step back here. You had sort of a 6 to 9 month sort of education period you're referring to, you and your wife. What did you do during that time period? Because that's one of the things that I really emphasize with people is, before you get started, there's sort of a 4-step process there, but the first one is education. And so how did you take about learning the fundamentals of real estate investing?
Well, I just kind of went out and tried to, go on the internet to find, where are the newsmakers, if you will? Where is the information that I can find? What can I listen to? Based on my schedule, I do a lot of listening on podcasts. And so kind of was natural for me to kind of go to it to see what's out there and available. That's kind of where I found your work, obviously, along with a bunch of others. And so it really was about finding online what is that information around real estate investing. So not only the podcast, but also kind of a subscriber to Audible, and found a lot of good books out there related to real estate investing. So, kind of took my time kind of going through as much information as we could on that. At the same time, is really working with other people that knew a little bit more about the market. And typically, these were agents of some sort or another. And when we originally started, we actually were looking in a different part of the city. But time after time, we would go into a particular home and kind of ran the numbers. It just wasn't enough for me to kind of pull the trigger and commit on something. Just kind of kept thinking it must be something better that was out there. So a little bit of it was, kind of the first time jitters and nervousness about jumping into a market. But as soon as we met Greg and kind of looked at the homes in the far northern suburbs of Atlanta, things just seemed to really make sense in terms of the numbers. And again, Greg was a great mentor to have in what we were doing and attempting to do. And he also came from our background in terms of the company we used to work for. So it was really good picking his brain and getting his advice on some of our opportunities.
Oh, that's neat. Okay, so looking at these homes that you have, I know you're looking at a certain amount per door. Are you also looking at, well, I want to get X number of doors, we're going to have at least this in order to get sort of our minimum. I know you talked about sort of that 10K mark in cash flow. Do you know if that translates in terms of doors yet, or that's not how you want to look at it? You just want to look at what they actually individually generate.
Well, we're at the point where, kind of depending on our expenses, we're probably really close to our first goal, if you will, with the number of doors that we have, right? Again, it really kind of depends on expenses. And so while we have a decent amount of income coming in from the rentals, they can also generate quite a bit of expenses, and it's probably no surprise the vacation rental has much higher expenses because we're paying for all the utilities and everything, upkeep and so forth. Whereas on a long-term rental, that's being taken care of for you. So again, we're really at that first level mark, and now it's kind of looking at the second level mark. And so we really are targeting that 20K. And so our real goal right now is to go ahead and continue to save. And as we get these cash flow in and other income that we have for our jobs, and we're continuing to sort of pile it together and then take a look at what's our opportunities at that point in time and what's available in the market.
And you're 56, right?
Right.
When are you actually looking at retiring, officially retiring?
We're looking about 5 years to make that transition.
God, that's great. Now, I'm just amazed here. I'm looking at 2.5 years, 6 properties. You've already reached about 10K on your goal, or you've already reached it. This is amazing, just the short period of time that you've done this. This is just really great. One other question here. Actually, I have a ton of them, but I'm going to have to try to curtail it in the interest and respect for your time because you're still working full time here. So, I'm wondering on the property management side, what you guys are doing.
So we are really doing project management ourselves. The 6 properties, our long-term rentals, are close by. They're really a short drive away. So if we need to do anything, we can go and take care of it ourselves. We do encourage, our renters to take care of the smaller stuff for them. And quite frankly, when we buy the properties, they really are already rehabbed, except for the last one. And we did quite a bit of the rehab ourselves. But the point is that when we get them, they're really at a point where they haven't really needed any kind of major, capital expenditures or repairs or anything like that. We've had occasional things like a hot water heater element may go out, or AC a motor might run out. But other than that, we really haven't had very many problems. And if we do, like on those examples, then I've got the numbers of the repair people, that I can just text them and ask them to come out as soon as they can. And of course, they know that we're a landlord and own some properties. They're more than willing to really prioritize, our renters and go ahead and take care of some of that work. So it hasn't been really too much of an extra work for us to be the property managers.
That's great. So you haven't really got a lot of those sort of in the middle of the night, overflowing toilet type calls or things like that you've had to respond to at this point?
None at the middle of the night. I've had some that I've, wake up pretty early in the morning and kind of respond to some folks. But again, we just haven't seen really any of those emergencies that really require something like that.
Are your tenants taking care of their own lawn care?
Yes, they are. Changing the filters and the HVAC units, some things like that help keep the property, maintained and running. We do expect the renters to do that. We have that spelled out in the lease.
Oh, that's great. Utilities, are you covering any utilities, or are they covering all their own utilities?
Now, renters are responsible for all the utilities.
Got it. Well, looking at this, okay, you've got definitely a track record here. You ramped up pretty quickly, and it sounds like you're still just moving ahead very aggressively. But in the process here, what was sort of your biggest mistake so far, and what have you learned from it?
Well, I can probably quickly tell you about two. One thing I haven't mentioned is that we did do a flip. We've done one flip, my wife and I, and as we did that, we were doing the work ourselves. Obviously, there were some big things that we had done, like we had the roof replaced, HVAC had to be fixed. Some of those things we contracted out. But as far as all the painting, the landscaping, and those kind of things, we did ourselves. But
Wow.
because we did it ourselves, the timeline really stretched over a few months to get it complete. And we unfortunately missed the window. With all the summer buying season kind of passed, we were well into fall by the time we really wrapped up. So one of the mistakes we would consider on that is that we should have contracted all of the repair work out, and so that we can turn it around much more quickly and kind of hit that sweet spot of when people are looking for a new home to move into. So that's one. And then the other one is that, well, we did invest in a turnkey property. I won't go into who that is, but about a year ago, we purchased a home that was to be built. And unfortunately, here's a year later, and we still don't have a home. And we're probably going to have to turn around and do some kind of, a more formal action as a result of that. And we had thought we had done all of our background checks and due diligence as a result of checking out the company, the property management, and everything. Because we actually went there to the local place and visited the teams that were in place. And so, but unfortunately, so far, again, we haven't gotten our home yet. And so I would say just be really careful if you're doing turnkey properties to really do that additional due diligence to make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Yeah, I think if you've listened to the show to any degree, you know my feeling on turnkey. I'm not a big fan, even though that's the way I started. I started with 3 turnkeys out of the chute, but it did not end well. So yeah, I can completely relate to that. So on the other side, what would you say your most successful thing has been?
Well, I think just a surprise for us on how well the lake house rental has gone. It's been our really big success, and we really try to make it a great experience for whoever comes to rent the place. And so we really try to focus on the people that are coming in if they're coming in like on a special occasion. And one of the reasons I think the house is doing well is that it's a 6-bedroom, and it allows 3 or 4 different families to meet together, whether they're maybe spread around the country, and they can kind of pick one spot to all get together. And so we really try to make it, seamless for them and have a great experience when they're there with their family and friends. So I like the fact that, it's about creating an experience and the relationships, if you will, with the people.
That's great. Kind of makes me think too. I wonder why, for example, you haven't tried to pursue more vacation rentals, and maybe convert some of the other properties. Why haven't you gone in that direction?
Well, because I'm not sure what that market holds. One, if there's more people, right, there's more supply, then obviously your price is going to go down. So that's kind of one aspect of it. I mean, two, I'm not sure, I guess the market, if you will, is sort of responding to vacation rentals. I think even some of the big players are starting to get into buying homes for Airbnb or home away and that kind of a thing as well. So to me, it's just not as necessarily stable or predictable as long-term rentals are yet. But we did consider it because there was another lake home on the same lake that we seriously considered purchasing. But when it kind of came down to it, if ran the numbers, it seemed like two. And again, usually if it's a vacation rental, it's much more expensive as well, right, to make the purchase. So we were able to get two long-term rentals for the same amount of money as it would have been for another lake house. And so the numbers just looked a little bit better in that regard.
Great, great. Well, this is what's really great in this this interview is one that you are a guy who started later in life. I also love that your wife's, it sounds like she's very, very involved, even on the rehab part of it, it sounds like. So, I mean, that's great when it's something you guys can do together like that. We have a lot of folks listening. Some of them are a little younger than you. And maybe they're approaching retirement. Maybe they've still got, 10, 15 years to go. Or maybe there are some that are already retired and they're kind of looking at, wow, I'm wondering if this nest egg is going to last long. They're the ones that are sort of paying down, or trying, drawing down, should I say, out of their retirement funds. And they're looking at real estate as a possible means to be able to change that situation. What advice would you have for those folks?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you're just getting into it, getting started like I was about 3.5 years ago, I would really study a little bit about a particular niche that you're interested in. There are so many aspects of real estate investing. They cover a wide gamut. I would just say pick one of those, pick a niche to focus on because you can get easily distracted with all the opportunities that are out there, but pick one that you have the interest in. And then I would say just get full on educated about that particular niche. So whether it's a single family home or vacation rental, or if it's commercial, whatever the case may be, find out as much as you can about it. And then I think the other thing to really focus on would be is make a choice about how passive do you want your investment to be. You can, it's kind of a scale, if you will. You can be very involved in management of that particular investment, doing something day to day, if you will, or you can be extremely passive in terms of handing your money off to maybe a syndication or some other thing where all the details are handled for you. So I just kind of understand, yourself in terms of, what level of passiveness do you want within your investment, and then, kind of make your decision from there.
Oh, that's great. Question I didn't actually talk to you about in advance, but I think it's interesting because, you've listened to our show for the last couple of years. And I was just kind of curious if there was anything that you might have heard on the Old Dogs REI network, or maybe a guest that we had that really made an impact on your real estate investing.
Well, I think, the encouragement is wonderful, right? So no matter kind of what part you get into, because I know you have at times, talked about multifamily rentals and so forth, and in a certain area I still want to learn more about. I think the encouragement that you give on the podcast is just absolutely wonderful, and it's folks like you that helps us on the other side really make the decision to kind of get into it, and then we're benefiting every single day as having done so.
Well, that's neat. Thanks for sharing that. I know that me, as also as an investor too, that part's important because there are times when things can be a little discouraging or a little challenging. And I'm just super impressed with the fact that you took this step that you did, and not only did you take one little sort of baby step, but you bought two properties in addition to the one you already had. And that's sometimes the hardest part for people. It's just making that first step. And I've talked to a lot of folks here. It's an exciting part of what I do here is chat a lot with folks like yourself. And it's really neat to hear when the people finally do take the step and it works out okay. And granted, you had a situation too that with this turnkey that didn't turn out so well, but you're so optimistic, and it's contagious too. And I think just looking at everything in perspective, we're going to run into those snags and those things that may not have gone as the way that we hoped they would. But if you stay with your nose to the grindstone like you have. I mean, you're plowing through there. That overall, it's gonna work out well. It's don't let the little things drag you down. I mean, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I always kind of like to look at sort of what's ahead for you. You're at 7 properties right now, and of course we're not counting even the home that you live in, right? So, but you've got the 70 investment properties, one which also shares as a family vacation home. But what's sort of ahead? What do you see happening in the next 5 years or even 10 years?
Yeah, so probably some of the immediate plans is that we're kind of looking to downsize now that the kids are out and on their own. We're still in the property where they grew up in, so we probably will downsize before long. Really take some of those proceeds and kind of look again for some additional opportunities in the market and see where we can really invest more and pull up some additional properties. And in longer term than that, I think it's kind of the same thing. Is that as we get these cash flows continuing to come in month to month, is really looking at that. How do we reapply those back into additional properties? So, kind of like the Dave Ramsey snowball effect of getting out of debt. We kind of like to take that approach on buying properties and, allow them to continue to multiply on their own, if you will.
You touched on a couple of key things there that I thought were really, really good is one, okay, so downsizing, which a lot of us, when we reach these years, that's one of our first considerations. But you've read a lot of Kiyosaki. So one of my questions is, are you going to rent or are you going to buy?
Well, right now, I think the plans would be to buy, although, that now gives us a second opportunity. Whereas I really wouldn't have considered that before, right? But now when you look at it in terms of what's an asset, what's not an asset, and what you can get for renting and the type of properties that are much nicer, it certainly will be something that we will look at when we make that decision. Whereas before we wouldn't even considered it.
And then the other half of the question is, you mentioned Dave Ramsey. So the other factor I would say is, are you looking at sort of a rapid, payoff on the investment properties once you reach your goal?
Right now, don't have that plan. And we've always had the sort of conflict, if you will, about the Robert Kiyosaki and the, debt is good, or at least good,
right,
mentality versus Dave Ramsey, which is no debt. And so we kind of have done both. And sometimes when we don't know which choice to make, which we do both. And in this case, we did. The first 3 properties, we did have a mortgage on them. And the next 3, we don't. And so, when I sit back and look, okay, I can understand leverage in terms of I'm getting more, benefit over the longer term as the house prices rise by having a mortgage on it. And I get the deal that the value of the dollar is decreasing, so the overall impact of my mortgage payment goes less, right? So those are all really good things to consider. But I do like a little bit of the safetiness of having something paid off. I think it's very clear, at least, based on what people are saying, next 2 to 3 years can be rather troublesome in terms of the market, in terms of the overall economy and so forth. So I think having kind of a mixture and having some properties that are paid off in case, you had to reduce rents for whatever reason, I think just kind of helps us out in a more long-term fashion.
Great answer there. I think, since, like I look at 2.5 years, you've been in this, you've been through a couple of tax cycles. So I'm sure you've seen the great benefits of having those mortgages in there too, on those properties. It definitely, and just having the write-offs that come with the rental properties, which is fantastic.
Right.
Well, we are pretty much getting near the end of our interview here. It's a shame because I could probably talk to you for the next couple hours here, but maybe we'll have to follow up offline here. But we have what we call our wrap it up session coming up here.
Hey, old dogs. I don't know if you're like me, but it's easy to get overwhelmed trying to manage and track multiple properties, juggling multiple bank accounts, and trying to determine just how much money we're actually making each month. Normally, I spend a lot of time manually inputting and updating my various spreadsheets to just keep track of everything. Well, we have a new sponsor here at the Old Dogs REI Network, and they must have been listening to this show because it looks like they've developed a solution just for me. I'm talking about a new company called Stessa. Stessa lets real estate investors automate the busy work so we can focus more on the things we love, like growing our portfolios and spending time with our families. To set it up is very easy. All you do is just take a few minutes to add your properties and link your accounts, and your income and expenses will update automatically. And what's really cool is that you can see all your properties and key performance metrics in one central dashboard. To learn more and get started with a free account, go to stessa.com/dog, of course spelled D-A-W-G. That's Stessa, STESSA.com/dog. This is where I ask you a series of quick questions, just so you can share resources that have been valuable to you for our listeners to be able to explore and see if those are things that they could use. So if you are ready you ready to wrap it up?
I am ready.
All right. Favorite real estate book?
I like The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. I think that's by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan and Dave Jenks.
That's right. Great book. Favorite business book?
Well, I tell you, I got a couple, especially come from the corporate world. First is I love Simon Sinek. So he's got one with Start With Why.
Yes.
It's an awesome book. And then I like Patrick Lencioni's books. And one of the favorites is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Great stuff. Great stuff. How about your most valuable website for success?
Well, I think as we've been getting into the real estate investments, it's hard not to go to Bigger Pockets and get a lot of information from there. But I also would shout out to Kathy Fettke and what she's got in the Real Wealth Network. And we've got a lot of good information from that one as well.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. How about, you're a tech guy. How about favorite apps?
Well, especially as it relates to real estate, I have to say I'm a big Evernote user.
Oh, okay.
Anything that we do in terms of, a receipt, any kind of document or anything, it's stored up in the cloud by property, and I can pull it out anytime I need to. So Evernote is very valuable. And of course, getting around Atlanta traffic, you almost have to have ways to do that.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I know. It used to be no traffic there. What's going on? Everybody loves Atlanta. I mean, they're still flooding into Atlanta. That's where I got my first property. I wish I would have bought like 10 of them back then. But yeah, that's a great area. How about your favorite quote?
Let's see. I love Winston Churchill. And I think he has one about kites rise against the wind, not with it. So just kind of confirm, if you will, that at times it's good to be a contrarian.
Excellent quote. Well, here's one that I don't know that I hope you never have to deal with, but sort of our apocalyptic question that if you lost everything you have, I mean, even your home, and just, all you've got is $1,000 in cash. What would you do with that $1,000 to try to rebuild everything that you've lost?
Well, when you say it that way, I might need to get a shelter. but what I probably would lean towards, though, is, it's going to be so important to keep your education up and be with your team to get built back up. So to me, it's as simple as kind of have a smartphone. I'd probably purchase a smartphone just to make sure that I'm still connected and I can get my education, continue it, and be with my team.
Yeah, that's great. And it's, that's the truth too, is that I feel anyway that real estate is more a relationship business than anything else. And you've got to have that connection to really make it work. But great answer. Well, this is a question usually, I ask people that have a sort of a real estate business or real estate a lot of folks, have educational courses and all that stuff. But I'm just going to ask you, and you can say yay or nay, whatever you want to do. But if somebody wanted to talk to you, would you be open for that? Just to kind of ask your advice on stuff.
Sure, absolutely. I would really welcome it.
Oh wow, well that's great, and you have a full-time job, so I hate to just like drop that on you, but. If somebody did want to reach you and just maybe pick your brain a little bit or just connect, and maybe they've even have properties in Georgia, who knows, what's sort of the best way for folks to reach you?
Sure. I can be found on LinkedIn or Facebook or they can reach me at my email address, which is jack@tugaloheights.com. And that's simply TUGALOHEIGHTS, tugaloheights.com.
Well, that's great. Wow, getting your own personal email, that's very generous of you. Thank you. Well, we are really definitely getting at the end. We are at the end here of our, and it's funny, okay, with all the people I've interviewed, from Robert Kiyosaki, Brandon Turner, Ken McElroy, and so on and on. I always send, advanced questions to people, and they read them, and, they kind of know what's coming. Well, this is the one thing that most of them get stumped on. And there's even some folks that say they couldn't sleep last night. They're practicing. They're trying to get ready for this last, what we call our infamous, closing howl here. And I love that word because it reminds me of the movie Three Amigos, where Chevy Chase asks, what does infamous mean? And Martin Short says, it means more than famous. Okay, so this is our more than famous closing howl here. And I know, you're from Georgia. Okay, I mean, that's like the home of hound dogs, right? I mean, there's a lot of hunting out there in the woods with their hound dogs. And so I am going to, after that big build up here, I am going to turn it over to you now to close us out with your best old hound dog howl. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I do have a husky, so she might howl with me.
Oh, okay. That's all right. All right. That was great. I got to give you applause on that one. Very good. Very good. Well, it has been such a blast to have you on, Jack. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I know that you're just a guy that's just quietly doing his thing and investing, but you got a great story to tell. And I think anybody that listened to this podcast really, really benefited a lot. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's been really a pleasure. Great to talk with you.
Pleasure's been all mine. I also want to thank all our Old Dog listeners out there too for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us, it means a lot, and we really appreciate it. And please note everything we talked about, and there's some good meat in this interview here. Everything that's presented that Jack's talked about can be accessed in our detailed show notes on the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. Look for the episode with Jack Poole. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward, and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.